All right, let's continue our discussion about Stoicism, going over the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. We have ended up in the 12th and final book, but my attention was drawn to section 14. Either the compulsion of destiny and an order allowing no deviation, or a providence open to prayer, or a random welter without direction. Now, if undeviating compulsion, why resist it? If a providence admitting the placation of prayer, make yourself worthy of divine assistance. If an ungoverned welter, be glad that in such a maelstrom you have within yourself a directing mind of your own. If the flood carries you away, let it take your flesh, your breath, all else, but it will not carry away your mind. I think what you see here expressed is a very core component of Stoicism. And there are a couple of things that are very interesting about it. One, again, core component is you will always have your mind. You are always able to reflect on things, to choose how to do things, and to choose how to respond. Well, the idea, of course, is that you will respond in the way that is best, but that's, of course, a complicated question, because it's difficult to figure out what is best, or what the best way to respond is in a given situation. But that's why you reflect on things, and why you may or may not, but why you may study Stoicism. So even when you are in complicated circumstances, or when you are in a difficult situation and things may be hard or may be confusing or may be unpleasant, you still have within yourself the ability, the power to respond the way that you want to respond. You have that choice. And what Marcus Aurelius is alluding to here, I think at the very end, is that no matter what happens, people can't really take that choice away. They can take away different things. They could take away your freedom, for example, but they can't take away your ability to think and your ability to make certain decisions. I think that's expressed very powerfully here. If the flood carries you away, let it take your flesh, your breath, all else, but it will not carry away your mind. That hegemonikon in Stoic terms, that directing center of your mind, you will always have at your disposal, and it allows you to choose what to do, choose how to respond, choose to let things affect you or let things not affect you. That's all within the power of your directing mind. Now, the second thing, and I'm doing this kind of in reverse order because I started at the end of this particular section, but going back to the first part, I think what he's trying to say is there are different ways to approach life, right? There could just be a destiny, and if everything is destined to be a certain way, why go against it? Because then it's destined to happen that way, and it doesn't really matter how you do things, but those things are scheduled, slated to pan out a specific way because they're destined to be that way. If they are, why go against that, right? Why would you go against that? If there is some sort of, as he says, providence open to prayer, if a providence admitting the placation of prayer, make yourself worthy of divine assistance. Imagine that that's the case. Imagine that you can pray for things and those things may actually happen. Well, then do those things so that you are a worthy person of getting your prayers answered, right? What I thought of when I read this was a quote by Cleanthes, and most of the writing of Cleanthes has been destroyed. It's not really available. There's a couple of fragments, but his actual scrolls are no longer there. Cleanthes was the second head of the Stoa, so the school of Stoicism, right? There was Zeno, and then his successor was Cleanthes. And we do have this short quote of his. I mean, this is secondhand stuff, so whether it was really his anyway, attributed to Cleanthes, the willing are led by fate, the reluctant are dragged. And I had to think of that because that to me too feels like something Marcus Aurelius is expressing here. Imagine that everything in the world is determined by fate. Everything pans out exactly the way it should pan out. If that is true in its most extreme form, then at the beginning of the universe, it was already determined what you're going to have for dinner tonight. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say that that is the case, that everything that happens to you in life is determined. A lot of people don't like this idea because I think people have an innate desire to be in control and to be in control of their own lives, and they don't like the idea of everything being determined by something, and that something could be in the mind of a god, or it could just be something like fate, or that's not really my concern here. But my concern is, imagine that were true. Imagine that you have a lot less choice than you think you do. Imagine that everything is determined and has been determined for you. Then why struggle? Now, that's a lot easier said than done, but because especially when something unpleasant happens to you, then you would rather not have that unpleasant thing happen to you. But I think if you can accept the idea of, well, this thing is happening, and I suppose it doesn't even really matter whether it was determined or whether it's chance or whether it just happens. But if you can accept that thing is happening, and you learn to not struggle against it, but to accept it as something that is happening to you and that you go along with, I feel that your life becomes a lot easier. Because at that point, you're just being, as Cleanthes quoted, you're being led by fate, but you're not being dragged along by it. You're just going along with what happens. If someone pushes you very hard and you push back, then the two of you may lose your balance. You may both fall over. If someone pushes you and you kind of go along with it, you tend not to fall over. Now, of course, the trick lies in distinguishing between what you should push back against and what you should not push back against. But in general, again, for me, Stoicism is a very pragmatic philosophy that to a large degree is about dealing with relatively smaller things in life, smaller annoyances, not massive things, but smaller annoyances. And I think if you can learn to accept those for what they are, kind of go along with them, as opposed to trying to push back very hard and struggling and trying to make them not happen or being upset about it, you can make your life a lot easier. Because that pushback and getting upset about certain things will not necessarily change the circumstances. They will not make the person that has just cut you off in traffic cut you off any less. Right? But that is something that happened. No one got hurt, and you go along with it. Go against the will of the go along with the will of the universe, and don't go against it. That's a very Stoic principle. So, those are my thoughts for this particular section. I'm always interested to hear your thoughts. So, let me know what you think. I hope this was useful. And I'll gladly see you again next week for more talk about Stoicism. Bye!